Who would have thought in 1880 that this would totally change the world? It's called The Journey That Changed Everything.
Some people may even call it witchcraft.
It's the story of Bertha Benz in the late 19th century with horses and wagons. And what would happen to all those horses? It's the same situation here. Just the pieces are different. We have office buildings. 4 years ago, office and work was the same. Now it's very different. And people are wondering what's going to happen to office.
Fran Saele
has spent over 35 years in commercial real estate, helping companies tackle the problem of old legacy offices.
The real problem in the office market is the lower end, which are struggling. They have no way out. Their buildings can't be reconfigured. The adaptive reuse potential is virtually zero. There are thousands of those. And as the data says, there's 1 billion square feet that wasn't needed any longer. The average space is shrinking by 17%.
Office space is going to look different as a result. What happens to those office spaces?
I suspect that there will be demolition going on in many markets. It just makes sense. And that's called the doom loop. It's a component of about 10 or 15 blocks where nobody goes there. Nobody works there anymore. The buildings are boarded up. And the problem is that all the research data will show that.
Welcome to What the Tech, your gateway to business strategies and tech secrets shaping today's workplace. I'm delighted to have someone today that can shed light on what's going on in the office space. Somebody that actually combines technology and work experience along with the commercial space, because things are changing. And if you've seen some of the stats from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, there are about 35 million people that are working from home in some capacity, some full, some hybrid. And things have drastically changed. And I have just the guy to give us some insights on what is going to happen in the next couple of years that's going to impact the workplace. So let me give you a proper introduction to him. Fran Saele, a senior corporate real estate executive with a rich global background as the Managing Principal of MorteVita. Welcome to the podcast, Fran Saele.
Well, that's a wonderful introduction.
Did I get it right? Or did I mess that up?
No, you did everything. I liked everything about, especially the pronunciation of the organizational name.
MorteVita.
It is Italian.
I'm Latino. I can't pronounce some of the Italian words. They're the two closest aligned languages, Italian and Espanol.
That's right.
So it's not a stretch. Now, if you ask me to do Korean or Japanese or something, I probably
It is very different. But great to be here, UN. What the Tech? I love that name.
We just used it from just talking out loud and just saying, hey, what can we, What the Tech? What the Tech? It's a play on our company name. And so, we're rolling with it.
I love it.
So let me ask you this. If somebody's coming across this podcast and there's some interesting characters there, why should they listen to this conversation that we're about to have?
That's a great question, really. I know with podcasts, people make up their mind pretty quickly early in the game, whether it's going to be worth listening to. And a lot of people just look for clips. They don't want to hear the whole thing. But I think the areas that I hope we're going to be talking about today is how our world with respect to work is different than it was just 4 years ago. And what has happened in the workplace itself, how that's transforming, and what's really happened in the office real estate business, which 4 years ago was synonymous with work. Office and work was the same. Now it's very different. And a lot of people are wondering what's going to happen to office and workplace. So, I think those are intriguing topics, and there's a lot of good things happening and some things that probably aren't so good. And a lot of people want to get some idea of what is really going on there. So I try to bring that to my audience as much as I can. And I think it's an interesting space.
You just said that there's some good and then things that are not so good. Let's start with what's not so good. What's happening that's really not good?
I think one of the things that we saw when the pandemic hit was that most women who were employees had a unique opportunity to, in effect, change the way they worked to the extent that they could be both mothers and employees and do a great job. And the work environment really is dependent on women. There are more women working than men, as I understand it. The problem that women have, who are the primary chief caregivers for children, is that with the increasing call for return to the office, what I like to call return to the past, is that the way we worked in the
Mm.
past was everybody came to one place 5 days a week and did their work and then went home. That is a big problem for many women. They can't deal with the commutes. They can't handle the childcare issues that then arise because they're not able to work in a flexible manner. It raises their costs significantly in terms of childcare and creates a really difficult place for many women. It's just really unfair to them. And I think progressive organizations are understanding that and are bringing that into their HR policies, but many are not. They're just saying you either show up or you're gone. And I think that's a real negative situation.
When I think about the organizations, the large ones that have the biggest publicity megaphones saying, hey, everybody get your butt back in your seat, back in the office. I think about the heads of those companies and running a company myself. You look at math, you look at data, and you let that inform you on where you should go. And as the kids say nowadays, the math is not mathing, Fran. These guys are smart, right? These guys understand math. There are a lot of them in public companies understand investors want return on investments. And all the data right now points to keep the people distributed as the distributed workforce for at least 20 or 40 different factual reasons.
Correct.
Help me understand why some of the largest companies with theoretically some of the smartest people are heading in the other direction.
There's some theories about that. Some probably have some merit. For example, I think the most interesting one is the recent Amazon announcement where they indicated that their office people needed to be in the office 5 days a week.
Correct.
Although they did say there was some flexibility there for women and other things, the essential driving message was you get back here. And many think that it's because Amazon is just overstocked with people. They have too many employees and they don't know how to neatly get rid of thousands of people. One way to do that,
Yeah.
which is actually going to save them a fair amount of money, is that they make this a requirement. If you don't show up, you have grounds to be terminated without severance. And that will save millions of dollars for Amazon.
Indeed.
And it makes the decision, really, the employee's decision. They're not being fired for bad work, for poor performance. They're being fired because they don't want to come back with their peers. And that's a good article here. The problem is that they are just not going to survive in that environment. But others will argue that the best and the brightest will leave on their own. They're just going to go. And Amazon does run the risk of losing many of those people.
The whole business model will not tank if some of your brightest ideas go elsewhere, your brightest people go elsewhere, whether it's competitors, Microsoft saying they're not going in that direction. I guess over time it erodes and chips away at things. I'm wondering, you've been around the block with a day or two, right? In, does it also look like, or is it the appearance that, on top of the fact that you probably don't have to pay hundreds of millions of dollars, which that is math, the math works out if you do it that way. Is it the appearance that you're making it look that way? Because if I think about Nike, and they started with 1 day in the office, then 3, and then
Right.
now everybody's got to come back in. And all the while they kept saying, the investors, we're going to turn things around, and things aren't turning around. Is it just that, hey, we're shaking things up, and then this mandate will make sure that people start innovating and creating and collaborating, and that'll get us back to where we should be? Is it the appearance of that, or is there something else going on there?
Well, I think that does give CEOs and boards some time to breathe. If they feel that they're not succeeding or their earnings are down or the trends are negative, what can we do to change the game, so to speak? Going from a distributed environment to a centralized environment is a way in which that organization likely worked, as did every other organization, differently. And perhaps during periods when they were like that, they had better performance. So I think it's not an illogical option. The problem is that all the research data, Nick Bloom and many other people who study this in detail, will show that is a negative step overall. And all the data suggests that is not going to move the organization in the right direction. Back to your point earlier about maybe getting rid of some of the best and brightest, Jeff Bezos, when he founded Amazon, and I think this was probably 10 or so years ago, said, I encourage my people to leave and go on and do their own thing. I mean, he was encouraging entrepreneurs to learn what they could at Amazon and then go do something else. So it's not totally against Amazon's history and ownership. It's just the way in which they're doing it, which is, I think, is really negative. And it's a stain, I think, on a company that personally I think is one of the greatest inventions in the world. It saves me so much time and effort every day. When I want something, I just click and it's there in a day or two. So I feel badly about that because I think the company's great. And Bezos, I think, is clearly a terrific individual, has done wonderful things.
Andy, by all metrics so far on the stock market side of things, he's doing the right moves, right? So he's
Mhm.
going to get a pat on the back till the math doesn't work out on that side. And then maybe people start clamoring for Bezos to come back. That's not unheard of. Steve Jobs, the guy from Charles Schwab. There's a bunch we could cite that have left
Starbucks,
and they brought him back.
you remember the Starbucks thing? That was
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So we'll
That
see.
didn't work out, though.
Sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, there's some definite headwinds. And you and I had a chance to talk a little bit before this. And one of the things that really just popped out was you talked about how renewals are changing and how office space is going to look different as a result of that. And the amount of square footage potentially, you threw out a number. I want to let you expand on. I think you used the B word, 1B, in terms of empty real estate out there.
Yes. The way I get there is this, that in the USA Today or this year, the average rollover space reduction by all tenants, and these are all office tenants, based on what I know about the stat, is that all tenants are renewing for less space and many for shorter terms than they had before. But it's
That's what
the
we've got
amount,
here, by the
it's the
way.
amount, yeah, you'd see it. It's the amount of space that they're taking. And the stat that I had, and I think this was a CoStar stat, was 17%. That the average number of space rolling over is shrinking by 17%. If you apply 17% to the total US office market, which is about 5.5 billion square feet, you wind up with about 1 billion square feet. If you extended it to the whole market, if everybody in the market at the same
Mm,
time have an opportunity to adjust their space footprint, what would that do? The data says that it'd probably be 1 billion square feet that wasn't needed any longer.
mm.
That's really not a real number, though. I mean, it's not going to happen in that manner. And I think what we're seeing in the office market is it's being divided into various segments, some of which are doing fine. The brand new big towers in Manhattan and Miami and Houston, other places are doing quite well because people want to be in those buildings with the best ergonomic components, the best environmental savings, and being sensitive to the environment, really.
Sustainability stuff.
Yeah, all kinds of pluses there. Really good energy, low carbon, everything. People want to be in the best tenants, occupiers want to be in those buildings, but there are not too many of those.
In terms of percentage, are they like only 10% of the market, 5%, or
Well, it's much less than that. It's probably 3, 4% today.
wow? So the very, very small percentage people and or companies want to be in those spaces.
And that's why they're leasing today because they won't be available. For a big high rise, you're looking at 3, 4, 5 years to get that up. And the pipeline has shrunken considerably. The amount of office construction in the next few years is much lower than it has ever been in recent history. So there will be a squeeze on the better buildings. And the question is, when those buildings lease out, which will happen, where will occupiers then go to? Well, they're going to have to go to something a little bit of a step down. But there's a lot of that. The real problem in the office market is the lower end of the market, the B, C, D spaces, which are struggling. They have no way out, frankly. Their buildings can't be configured, or the adaptive reuse potential is virtually zero, other than maybe storage. There are thousands of those across the country. And as those tenants' leases expire, they're probably going to move up to the next stage. Maybe not to the top tier, but a better tier with a smaller footprint if they still want to have an office in the market that they're currently in.
What happens to those office spaces? That mean they're still, if a fraction, let's call it a fraction of the market is the top tier, 3% or less, right? That means that 97% potentially are going to be in some type of situation, or as they say now, the kids say situationships,
Right.
where they may not have enough tenants. They may not have any tenants at all. They may not even have a use for them other than storage. I'm hearing a lot of conversation about there could be a huge financial impact as a result of that, or they could be saved and refurbished and retrofitted. What do you think is the most logical thing that's going to happen there?
Well, just to put that component in perspective, it's much larger than certainly the top tier buildings and even the A quality buildings. combined, that's a fairly good size part of the market. But by far, the biggest segment is the lower, it was the older and less current buildings out there. And they're everywhere throughout America. In St. Louis, for example, there's a whole section of downtown St. Louis, which is actually a fairly vibrant place to be, but it's a component of about 10 or 15 blocks where nobody goes there. It's dangerous. Nobody works there anymore. The buildings are boarded up and it's treacherous to drive down the street. And that's called the doom loop. There was a large office building that sold for peanuts, just a very small number compared to what it had been worth 5-10 years ago. And that's happening in those doom loops now all the time. There really is no market for them. There's no value there. And the owner is basically stuck, or the lender who ultimately will have the building is stuck with it. What they ultimately do with it depends on, what, there may be some miracle that appears next year or the year after. But I suspect that there will be demolition going on in many downtown markets fairly soon. It just makes sense to get those buildings down that have no potential for future lease up.
And as you're saying that, I'm thinking about history. We used to be in the horse and buggy, right? We used to be in things, not even the horse and buggy, most rural area, parts of the whole country were pretty much farms. Have we been here before in terms of the space? Let's call it a space that doesn't have a purpose like it used to anymore. And then all of a sudden it gets reused into something else. Are we in that moment where we're like looking at that, like these office towers don't serve that purpose anymore because we don't need to put people in there anymore?
That's a good way to frame it. And yes, this has happened before. I do think the best example of that is a story. It's a 3 or 4 minute story. It's available on YouTube. And it's the story of Bertha Benz, who was the wife of the Benz who founded Mercedes-Benz. And her decision basically to take their prototype and drive it 140 kilometers from where they were living to this person's mother and family in another part of Germany. And it's called The Journey That Changed Everything. That is it. Basically, what this shows is that in the late 19th century, horse and buggy was still everything, that people moved in concert with horses and wagons that all were pulled by horses. And there was a huge industry in horses. And then all of a sudden, this woman who you're streaming across the screen here decides to take her 2 children and go on this drive across Germany, where the roads are pretty miserable, I suspect. And this is an impact of her. And I think this actually happened because it's documented at the end of this video, where something happened in the engine. She had to make a small repair, get some fuel, and restart the engine, which of course amazed everyone there. They had no idea what this thing was or how this would impact them.
Some people may even call it witchcraft because they're like, where's the horse?
Yeah, indeed. I think you see the Reverend there who might have been thinking that. So
magic.
Bertha does a great job. This is a wonderful little video. She needs to get Legroin, which is a form of fuel. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's what they had in pharmacies at that time. And she bought a few liters of Legroin, put it in the car, and we're almost at that point. Of course, here's this woman in this dress walking into a bar with a bunch of scruffy guys and a mule. And you can imagine the impact. So the point is that who would have thought in 1880 that this would totally change the world of transportation and how we lived and worked? And what would happen to all those horses that were out there? Well, I mean, it's the same situation we have here. It's just the pieces are different. We don't have horses. We have office buildings. We still have the need to commute, but we do it easier. We can live farther away. We don't have to be in these little towns with mules. So it is a sense that we had office buildings for about 120, 130 years. They started right around the turn of the 20th century. And then we began to see high-rise buildings. There's several of them, some of the inertial ones around the Great Lakes in Chicago, Buffalo, other cities like that, and of course, New York. And those buildings, many of them are still there and many are still occupied. But that's not where people are going to be in the future. They're going to be distributed. They're going to be using office buildings, but it's going to be in different places that are closer, most likely to where people live, and will be convenient to get together in office spaces. Not the ones that are in downtowns today because people don't live there.
So in 20 to 30 years, the commute as we know it today will be completely different then?
Well, the commute, it's through some different means. We talk about the virtual element today in Zoom and Teams and things like that. That's rudimentary video. What we have here is a pretty good quality video. You can see clearly, but it is not like being in a room together with people. But if you look at what's happening in holograms and the
Mm.
potential there, at some point, maybe not the next couple of years, but in 10, 15 years, you'll be able to push up a virtual meeting, which will be in holograms, and it'll look exactly like you were sitting in a room together. Then you can actually shake hands.
You have a
That's for sure.
magical cart show up in front of your house and bust down or break down. I tell you what, that would have freaked me out. Imagine today, instead of a cart like that or a car, we call it now a car, a spaceship. It's coming cruising right through your neighborhood like that. No tires, no engine, no noise. You'd freak the out, right?
It actually happen in grocery deliveries where they're automated, autonomous vehicles.
Yes, I've seen those.
And they're also, I think Amazon is actually using drones to drop
Mhm.
packages.
Yes,
So that's already happened.
yeah.
Still pretty rudimentary, but it'll open your eyes.
So technology changed the face of the earth. If we're going back to our car analogy, our horse and buggy analogy, we're at an intersection where AI is fast and rapidly changing how we work, what we do with it. What does work really mean anymore? Is it all these busy tasks of spreadsheets and moving data around when you can have a thing do it for you, like AI, move the data, give you analysis, let you make decisions? You're talking about unified communications so that you have the ability to speak, talk, and use messaging all in one platform.
Right.
The impact of that on work and then the workplace, it seems like that's going to be the driver for a lot of offices more than just the actual physical space itself.
I think you're right on that point. I think it is interesting that you have two things that are happening at almost the same time. You have the movement out of office, which was driven by the pandemic, to go from 85% in office to only 10% maybe over the initial part of the pandemic, recognizing that people could actually work remotely and be effective. That was a huge change. And of course, we're still dealing with that now as the market tries to reorganize itself. But now we have AI that totally transformed what everybody's expectations are for the future and how we're going to work, and how everybody will have their own AI bots who will be doing a lot of stuff for you as an individual and
Mhm.
make you much more productive and efficient, organized, and certainly be ahead of your peers who are just using paper and pen or Excel sheets. Those
Right.
people aren't going to be doing well.
No.
So you have this confluence of those two factors, the new way people work and AI creating a very different platform on which work will be done. Nobody really knows how that's going to come out because it's brand new and it's pervasive.
I think we talked about this a little while back ago, where you have folks that ex Google CEO talking about the convergence of a lot of these algorithms and bots, and that multiple tasks rolled up into one thing where
Right.
you can have AI do something for you in perpetuity rather than the one time command, do this. And then you tell it, I want you to keep doing this till this happens. And it's going to have the intelligence to do that and combine all these different things into essentially one AI algorithm.
Yeah, I think we're moving in that direction. As a matter of fact, there's a debate that I'm involved in. It's another podcast, which I probably shouldn't plug, but
No, that's okay. Yeah. What are you going to talk about?
this is Ram Srinivasan, who's the
Mhm.
head of future work at JLL for North America. Also a brilliant mind in this segment. He has an AI bot which looks and feels and talks exactly like himself, and he's going to debate with his own bot live
Ooh.
on air. This
Oh,
is pretty interesting. So I've asked the question of when we're getting to this point, and someone wants to know, is this the human component or is this the AI component? And what he basically said is there is no difference. It's the same. It's a single new entity that is creating this content. It certainly has a human component, but it is enhanced, a supercharged human component. I don't know if that translates to raising someone's IQ from 100 to 150. I don't know exactly how that is all going to be evaluated, but that's clearly something very, very different.
you could potentially have yourself working in more than one place. If
Absolutely.
you are you and you are doing tasks on behalf of an employer,
Yes.
You theoretically then say, yeah, I'm loaning myself out to 3 companies.
Right.
3 of me's is better than 1, and 3 incomes are better than 1. Could you
Right.
potentially do that?
Actually, there was a story, and I forget all the details of this, but there was a promoter who was selling something, and there was a huge market in India, and the AI bot generated his voice and his pitch to every local community. And they were sent in, and all the video that went into those markets was this person talking about this new product, but using all the local appeal and all the connectors, and his sales went off the chart. So
Wow.
I think we're seeing a lot of that happening.
Wow.
People will be omnipresent and certainly more effective than they had been in the past.
I'm sure you've said something like this where, boy, if I had like at least 4 of me, I could be a billionaire or whatever, something like that. That may be the case. We're
Right.
not far away from that.
I think that's true. I think that is true. And it's a bit scary. But one of the things that people I think are concerned about is if all of the actual work or a lot of the work that, people used to do at lower levels, accountants, maybe you could say that. I mean, is there going to be a role for accountants anymore, or is that all going to be on blockchain and that's going to be done by AI? I have no idea, but I'm glad I'm
You'll
not an
still need
accountant.
some humans, right? There are
Well, you'll
still
need something.
humans.
Instead of 1,000, maybe you need 10.
It's gonna be very interesting because it's gonna change everything. Again, does history repeat itself? And if you're telling me with Mercedes-Benz, that was a concept of the car that completely changed the world.
Right,
I think the internet and computers being mass distributed and smartphones was probably, I would say, the next phase of that.
right,
And now we're in this whole new phase of, wow, maybe you can replicate yourself, right? Maybe you don't need to go into the office and yourself, your essence, your programmable you can do way more than you could ever do.
if you think about Elon Musk and his brain plug, I think many think that you'll be able to, in effect, transform your human brain into some type of digital brain, and it will, feel a little bit differently because you're not human anymore. But you may be able to transfer the essence of humanity into a digital format.
Wow.
What happens then?
I
Do
don't
we?
know. Now you're getting
Do
into
we
the
all become
Matrix.
feral?
Now you're
Yeah,
talking like the Matrix movie. That's essentially what that was.
I guess that's true. So
Wow.
when the UFO lands and the robot walks out, is it a robot or
Or
do
is
you
it a
really?
programmable robot that somebody has on their end?
How do we get off on this tangent? It's wonderful. I mean, to speculate about the future today
Well,
is
I'm a history guy and I'm always curious. Humans are humans. We dislike, we get angry, we get happy. We still have the same emotions we've had for thousands of years. The
right,
only thing that changes is what's around. And when we open our eyes, what do we see? That changes.
right,
But that is really the driver. People still want to be clothed, fed, happy, and all
right,
of the stuff. And that drives creativity. All of these innovations drive change that's around us. But at the end of the day, the human side of things doesn't really change. And therefore, although the environment changes, we'll come back eventually to all the stuff we used to like or didn't like because it tends to repeat itself. And that's why we went on this tangent. Like, there has to be a point in time where we were here before. And what
right,
did we do?
right. There's a very old movie, which is still available, I think, on YouTube called Quest for Fire. And it's a story about cavemen and cave people living 50,000 years ago. And if you look at the movie and look at some of the characters, I can see people I know in those characters. They
Really?
haven't changed at all.
Well, again, yeah, I don't think that's going to change. We're going to have creatives and musicians, and we're going to have chiefs and underlords and overlords and commanders and
Right.
fighters, and that doesn't change. But something that does, if we segue a little bit to things that disrupt or continue that a little bit, I know that while we're talking about the spaces that may be under distress, tell me what would be the financial impact if these places did not have tenants, they were empty and stayed empty. We talked about the Dune Loop part of it, but economically, would that be like our 2008 when Lehman went under or even worse?
It's an interesting question. Of course, every building is different in terms of its tenancy, how it's financed, how it's owned, where it is, what the markets are like. So they're all individual situations. But the bottom line is in a typical market where there are these older buildings that employees really don't want to work in. They aren't healthy to work in. They may have asbestos and a lot of unattractive elements. If you're shrinking the demand considerably, as is happening, who's going to work there as it was intended for, as office space of some type? That's going to be a very small market, and there probably aren't enough tenants to go around. I mean, some startups maybe, but it's really going to be a real struggle to make those things work. Many of them, particularly older ones, do lend themselves to conversion. But when you do the math on converting an office building to an apartment building or really any other use, it's very expensive, and it's a very difficult project to pull off and make economic. I've been advocating recently for some federal subsidies to help cities do that. And in my early experience in the business, there were many government programs like UDAG, Urban Development Action Grants, and others, where the federal government basically lent money into projects to soft equity. It's really subordinated equity that would provide a basis for a lender, a private lender, to lend money. And there were many projects that got underway that otherwise wouldn't have. I think there's something like that probably going to happen after we get through this election. And there will be a recognition that we need federal money to come into these cities to help the cities transform these buildings to whatever else they can be. And if they need a little boost financially to get over the hump, to make them work for low income or other demands, where we know there are strong demands for many components of space, but they don't financially work. And that's a nickels and dimes thing, but you got to make the numbers work for those projects to get off the ground.
Whoever that administrator is, let's just say HUD ends up
Right.
with the pot of money to distribute for these
Right.
types of projects.
Right.
If the secretary of HUD came to you and said, Fran, come on down to DC, let's talk about this, what are the 3 things that you would want to say to them, that person?
I don't have no preparation for the answer to that. And we can wing it. How about
Yeah. No, you had great ideas. That's what I'm saying. You got the
that?
guy or gal who's gonna
Right.
say, "I'm gonna make a decision or decisions based on what you're consulting me that I should do and allocate. Give me 3 things that we could do in the short term and long term that are gonna pay off for America when it comes to these buildings."
There has been a lot of work already done to qualify older office buildings as their suitability for repurposing. So a lot of that work has already been done, and it would be fairly easy, I think, to establish in every community around the country which buildings make sense to convert or refurbish and which don't. First of all, you'd have to identify who was in the worst condition, who needed this the most, and where the private sector isn't going to do it, and evaluate where you can place that money. To some extent, it's going to be political, as every other decision is that comes out of Washington. But hopefully there will be some equity there with respect to, regardless of whether it was a Republican district or a Democratic district, the people in need are important. You can certainly put a lot of that in North Carolina if you want right away. But there will be a need for this to happen to keep communities healthy. And then you don't want to go through major programs of demolition that could be avoided with a little extra money and some ingenuity and innovation in the private sector.
Tell me about how the younger generation, because to me, it seems like they're driving a lot of this. They're pushing for the environment, sustainability, workplace balance, smaller geographical areas where you work and play. I've heard the term 15-minute cities. How does the Gen Z, millennials, and others, and the demographic shifts where there's going to be a lot of workers just retiring here in the next year, how does that factor into what's going on?
That's an interesting question also. The thing I noticed, because I have 2 millennial children, and when we talk about what their plans are, sometimes the subject of having children, it doesn't come up. And when you bring it up, they don't want to talk about it.
Really?
Yeah, the birth.
Give me a little bit of insight into that, because I have a little one. He's only 6, so he's not there yet to even
No,
have
he's
that
not there yet.
discussion.
But if you look at the current statistics, okay, in terms of children associated with generations and the birth rate, basically, the birth rate has been declining for years. And it's at the point now where I think if we didn't have an invasion of immigrants, we would be in real trouble. Except there are other communities that tried this, and other countries that tried it, and it didn't work out very well. In Europe, where they brought in a lot of Middle Eastern and Eastern European people into Germany and France and others. Some of those worked out, some of that didn't. So it's difficult to import people to have babies. But that's in effect what I think is happening. When we do see high birth rate among immigrants who actually come here as a family, which is good for them, and it's good for the country because there are workers needed. I think up in Ohio, this was a big topic of discussion. The Asians, that's right up the road here. And I've never been to that location, but apparently they wanted those people because they didn't have enough workers. With birth rate being down, you need less housing. You need
Mm.
less of everything. So there is a potential for shrinkage, which is not a good thing. The country moves on growth. It doesn't move on shrinkage. So that is, I think, an important factor. But beyond that, it's clear that the way in which we live is going to be different in the future. And the whole 15-minute city thing, which it's starting to happen everywhere. And if you look at Adam Newman's new Flow product, the basis of his product is that you'll have the things that you need primarily in your life. That you're going to need a place to live, a place to work, and a place to do your retail shopping fairly close. And that's his plan in the current project he has in Atlanta. And it seems to be working. So I think we're going to live differently. The buildings that are now in place aren't in the right places.
Mm.
I can't move a building.
No.
You can demolish it here and rebuild something a little bit different where it should be today. And that's just part of the natural growth and evolution of any industry, frankly. So we shouldn't be surprised by it.
Wow. We're living in interesting times. Things are changing. Buildings that were maybe iconic, maybe some of those will stay around, but sounds like a whole lot are either heading for the wrecking ball or they're just going to be moved, or the ones that could be moved. I've seen a few buildings moved, not a whole tower moved, but
Not
small.
toward,
Yeah, no, you can't move those. You can't, not at all.
no matter how big your booster is, could move it. I think, when you do have demolitions, I don't think just bringing down individual buildings and leaving holes is a good idea. We saw that a lot in Detroit. I don't know if you're ever in Detroit in the last century, but it was like a ghost town once you got out of downtown. But if you could have relatively good-sized patches of space, maybe it's 3 or 4 buildings that come down, you create a park, you create some type of amenity for children, you do something on the environment, you have a nature preserve or something. Those kinds of things will help bring people back.
Well, that happened in Brooklyn. I lived in Brooklyn during the 80s, mid 80s, where it was like what you said, a little bit like a doom loop, where parts of this Brooklyn where you just see crack files everywhere. Nobody wanted to be on the street. There were people that were getting mugged and robbed just left and right. New York City itself wasn't safe. People didn't want to go into downtown New York. That's all changed. And people came back to Brooklyn. A lot of abandoned buildings were torn down and redone, some refurbished, a little bit of that. But I think that especially in the urban centers where some of those places are condemned or going to be ghost towns, it makes sense. Put green spaces. I've seen parts of Detroit where they've put in gardens and more green spaces, and it's brought people back into those areas.
Right.
You know what? Human creation and innovation doesn't end. I think we're just at that. Maybe AI can help us out of this equation.
I'm confident that AI will come up with a better solution than just you and me thinking about it.
Fran,
yeah,
what are we missing here? What have we not touched on that's important for people to think about in the context of the future of work and commercial real estate?
I think as a society, we need to be a little more open about the future and not presume that we have the right solutions today that are going to last for 100 years. They aren't. I think it makes sense for people, whether they're oriented towards the existing stock of office or whether they aren't, to try to let a compromise be developed, which will be good for organizations and be good for the people and address some of those issues I mentioned that women have with this area. So I think a little more openness and a little more kumbaya would be helpful to arrive at better workplaces for everyone.
I can't add to that because that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So much so that I'm going to give it one of these. I love it. That's great.
I never get that. And the good news is that he doesn't have a boo button, so we won't get that.
I don't have one. I've got a lot of sound effects. That's just not one yet. You may be inspiring me for creativity on that one.
Okay.
Fran, from time to time, we like to play a game with our guests. Really straightforward. It's one where I ask a phrase or just a small question, and whatever hits your brain, it's your answer. All right. It's the rapid fire segment.
Dangerous thing.
Ori, give us the rapid fire segment. All right.
Okay.
Your brain is your answer. It's not right or wrong. It's your answer. Here we go. You ready?
I hope so.
Walmart versus Amazon.
Amazon, no real option there.
Okay. Amazon. Favorite social media platform?
For me, LinkedIn. But I like Twitter.
Yeah, those are the two of the top for a lot of folks.
I should say X. Sorry about that, Elon.
Favorite piece of tech?
My brand new workstation. It's
Mhm.
amazing. It has colored lights, fans. When you do better, the lights change. It's just wonderful. But I'd say I'm still a computer guy.
Okay, computer guy. First thing you check in the morning?
I have a command from my wife to make it before I do anything else. So I don't have any other choice.
Okay.
Coffee.
Okay, coffee. That's one of my first. Not always my first, but close to being the first in the morning. Here's an easy one for you.
Okay.
Game-changing book.
Wow.
Or books, if they're more than one.
Yeah, there's so many. It's hard to go down the road of just one book. What I will say is Amazon. And if you buy digital books, given up on paper books, there's no place to put them. But whenever you're watching any news program, television, you'll see a lot of interviews with various types of people. Many will have books, and it's easy to just pop it into your Amazon browser and have a sample of that book on your tablet immediately. I find that to be the best way to evaluate books. And there's so many, I just don't really want to.
Okay. All right. Again, your answer is your answer. There's no right or wrong. You don't want to offend any authors that you personally know. Okay. So the last one, this has got to be the easiest one of all the bunch. A person or people you admire.
Well, I think Jeff Bezos has to be at the top of the list. I just think he's one of the most dynamic people who ever lived, frankly. And what he did and how he got through his business is just truly amazing. The other person who I think is wonderful, who's still alive, I think, is Fred Smith, who is the founder of FedEx. And I don't know if you know the story about FedEx and Fred Smith.
I don't. Enlighten me.
The telling story about Fred Smith is that at some point, and this is when they were flying little small jet planes, at one point he ran out of money and he wasn't going to be able to make payroll on Friday. So he flew one of the jets to Vegas and bet big and won big. And the only reason FedEx is still here is because of that.
Wow.
Someone who is totally determined to make it in this world is Fred Smith.
I did not know that he bet it all on.
Yeah.
What do you know? What he was it?
There's a story something I don't remember what it was.
He did. He went to Vegas.
FedEx survived.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing that he took that risk, because had it not gone right, FedEx, beep, beep, beep. I do have a sound effect for that one somewhere. Here we go.
And of course, Elon, you gotta be up with Elon. Just such an amazing person. He's done so much in so little time. I don't know how he does it.
I don't either. All right, Fran, you've said a ton that we could easily do 2 more hours on each one of these little things. The Mercedes-Benz story is just fascinating, and history repeats itself, and so much. I want to really thank you for checking in with us, dropping knowledge, leaving us with a lot to think about. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. And if you appreciated Fran and the words that he had to drop today on us, go ahead and hit that subscribe and like button, because it means a lot to us. It helps us bring wonderful guests like Fran to the podcast. And without your support, we're not able to do that. And if you really want to support us, we'll have links in the description, so that if you're a business and you've got complex technology needs that need fixing, Global Tech is here to help you out. We've been in business for over 20 years, and that's exactly what we do: help businesses with complex technology issues. And you know what? We talked about Nick Bloom today several times in this podcast, and we actually talked to Professor Bloom from Stanford, and we have him on a previous podcast where he did talk specifics about hybrid work, what's coming down the line, and what the future looks like with hybrid work. So if you want to find out what the future looks like from the standpoint of Professor Nick Bloom, go ahead and check out that episode. I'll see you in that episode. Thanks for coming today.